the name of Monsieur Poilievre.
Mr. Poilievre, seconded by Mr. Strahl, moves that the House call on the government to stop raising the price of gas by clearing the way for pipelines and eliminating the carbon tax on fuel. The honourable member for Carleton. Debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I will be splitting my time with the honourable member for Kawartha Lake Sprott. Mr. Speaker, if there were an energy paradise in the eyes of this Liberal Prime Minister, it would be Vancouver. There you will find gas prices higher than at any time, anywhere in all of North America. Recently, the Prime Minister visited Vancouver, and a reporter asked about the then $1.69 a litre prices. And he said, "This is exactly what we want." He was thrilled to see high gas prices because he believes that high gas prices are the only way that we can save our environment. Of course, he inherited a massive family fortune. He is a multimillionaire. He drives around in a taxpayer-funded limousine, as he did for most of his childhood, and has no worries whatsoever about paying bills. Because he's never had to worry about money, he doesn't worry about Canadians' money. And such it is with his admiration for high gas prices in British Columbia in general and Vancouver in particular. Now, the Prime Minister's admiration for BC's high gas prices is not new. It did not only manifest itself in that famous "this is exactly what we want" comment. Rather, it is the basis for his entire carbon tax program. As the Prime Minister was beginning to roll out his plan to hike taxes on gas and other energy sources, he consistently pointed to British Columbia as the ideal model to replicate. And so he wants to do across Canada what the carbon tax government has done in that province. Now, that province has its own carbon tax regime, one the Prime Minister supports, and one that he requires through a new federal law that mandates provinces each institute their own tax on gas and other fuels. The only difference between BC's carbon tax and the one that the Prime Minister is imposing in Ontario, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan is that it's a little farther along. The tax rate is about, I think it's about $40 a ton of carbon dioxide, whereas the Prime Minister's carbon tax this year only starts at 20. So right now, we can look to British Columbia to see the Liberal future. The Prime Minister has admitted that he plans to raise Canada's national carbon tax by 250% if re-elected. And that's just by 2022. In the year 2023, not far off from now, it could go much higher than that. Internal government documents show it could go as high as $300 a ton, which would be more than 10 times higher than it is right now. I say all of this as background because if you look at British Columbia's tax rate, it is in line with where the Prime Minister wants to take the other provinces that on which he has imposed the carbon tax in the next several years. And what has that meant? Well, British Columbia now pays $1.79 a litre for gasoline. If you look at the records, Madam Chair, you will find that this is the highest price per litre of gasoline ever recorded anywhere in North America. Exactly what the Prime Minister wants. Well, we see this reflected right across the country, where carbon taxes have raised prices already in Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, New Brunswick, and elsewhere. These higher gas prices are only the beginning. The Prime Minister has made it clear that they will have to go up, up, and away. And Canadians will be paying the same $1.79 a litre right across Canada that British Columbia is experiencing right now. Now that sounded wonderful to the Prime Minister in theory, but now in practice we see what it means. Single mothers who can't afford to get to their jobs are going to struggle to feed their children. Seniors on fixed incomes who have to drive to get groceries are struggling to make ends meet. Small businesses who enjoy no rebate of any kind for the carbon tax they pay have no choice but to cut the wages or the jobs of their workers. I had two of them in my office a couple of weeks ago. They lay foundations on homes, and they say very clearly they can't pass their carbon tax cost along to their customers. People can't afford to pay any more, and as housing prices are too high already. These two gentlemen don't know what they're going to do. But right now, these two very middle-class guys are paying a heck of a lot more for a tax the Prime Minister has imposed here in Ontario. Now, back to the British Columbian example. The Prime Minister claims that his tax will make Canadians better off, that somehow they'll get more from paying the tax than it will cost them in the first place. He wants you to believe that if you give him your wallet, he'll put more money back in it than you had before. And he wants, when we ask, where has this ever been done, he says, why? In British Columbia. That's where this whole idea of the so-called revenue-neutral carbon tax was first invented. But now we know that that was a fraud. Subsequent studies have now shown that every single British Columbian is now paying more in carbon taxes in BC than they're getting back in any other form of compensating rebates or tax relief. In fact, of all the jurisdictions that have introduced their own carbon tax in Canada, in all of those cases, the government has won and the taxpayers have lost. That is true not only in British Columbia, but in Alberta, formerly in Ontario under the previous Wynne government, in Quebec, and in any Atlantic province that has its own tax. In every single case, the government is taking more and the taxpayer is keeping less. These are not opinions, these are mathematical facts. And the reason is because politicians are with money the way bears are with honey. Once they get their hands on it, they just can't stop. The Prime Minister's strategy is a good one, though. It's a good electoral strategy. Give you a small check before the election and a massive bill after the election. A few $100s before you vote in enticements and many thousands of dollars in costs after you vote. Now we know this because the Prime Minister's running out of money. He's got a $20 billion deficit. The cost of government has risen by 25% in just over 3 years. There's no way he can keep paying the bills without collecting more taxes. So he will raise taxes, and he will ensure that he collects more than taxpayers keep. But he'll do it after the election, when he no longer needs voters, but still needs their money. And another way he's costing British Columbians, of course, is by having blocked pipelines. Most of the gasoline that British Columbians use comes through the Trans Mountain pipeline, which was supposed to triple in capacity, but for his bungling and obfuscation. We will clear the way for pipelines. We will axe the carbon tax to make life more affordable, not just for British Columbians, but for all Canadians, so that people not only get by, but get ahead. Thank you.